And who published it?
I think we're ready. Thank you all so much for coming out. This is the first night of 2 nights of very special author readings that we have. This is actually the second set of them. We're really proud how these are developing. For those of you who made it to the last set of author readings, we tried to cozy ourselves into the ambiance that we have in the store and realized that wasn't quite probably the amount of space that we needed for the readings that we have planned for this weekend. So thank you so much for coming, and I first want to introduce, I'm going to hand over the MC work to SJ in a little bit. For now though, I will just sort of introduce the entire evening by saying we have 3 really remarkable authors. The Thomas brothers, Scott and Jeffrey Thomas, are going to be our first 2 authors for the evening, and then of course incredibly proud to be able to say that we have Caitlin Kiernan joining us later on in the evening. And to start it off though, to sort of be the warm-up act, our very own, the Joey Zone, is here to read 2 very special pieces. One is a Dunsany piece, one of his favorite pieces from Lord Dunsany, and then also a poem written by one of Providence's cherished gems that has unfortunately left us for Pittsburgh for some reason, Brett Rutherford. And he has a great poem of Brett's to read as well to kind of start off a couple short pieces just to get us started. So Joey, if you'd like to come up. Joey, I should introduce, has been doing art as well as just general being an amazing, great person for us and for sort of the local Lovecraft community for decades now. And is particularly well known for his art, but also I think tonight you'll see his talent for reading great stories is pretty extreme as well. So thank you all for coming, and we'll pass it off to Joey.
Thank you very much. Once upon a time, less than 100 years ago, Edward John Morton Drax Plunkett, Lord Dunsany, gave a lecture at the Copley Plaza in Boston as part of an extensive reading tour. He read his short play, The Queen's Enemies, and the following story I shall attempt to relate to you, a story about storytelling, or rather not. Not 10 feet from Dunsany was a young dreamer. Despite writing later, I did not need a signature, for I detest fawning upon the great. This timid, aspiring aesthete, already a Dunsanian devotee for life, would later signify tribute in Sarnath, Ulthar, and Kadath in the Cold Waste. Now upon this time, it is 1919. The last book of wonder has just been opened, and you are in the front row, right next to Howard Phillips Lovecraft, to hopefully learn why the milkman shudders when he perceives the dawn. In the hall of the ancient company of milkmen, round the great fireplace at the end, when the winter logs are burning and all the craft are assembled, they tell today, as their grandfathers told before them, why the milkman shudders when he perceives the dawn. When dawn comes creeping over the edges of hills and peers through the tree trunks, making wonderful shadows, touches the tops of tall columns of smoke, going up from awakening cottages in the valleys, and breaks all golden over Kentish fields, when going on tiptoe, thence it comes to the walls of London and slips all sliding. Up those gloomy streets, the milkman perceives it and shudders. A man may be a milkman's working apprentice, may know what borax is and how to mix it, yet not for that is the story told to him. There are 5 men alone that tell that story, 5 men appointed by the master of the company, by whom each place is filled as it falls vacant. And if you do not hear from one of them, you hear the story from no one, and so can never know why the milkman shudders when he perceives the dawn. It is the way of one of these 5 men, graybeards all, and milkmen from infancy, to rub his hands by the fire when the great logs burn, and to settle himself more easily in his chair, perhaps to sip some drink far other than milk, than to look around to see that there are none there to whom it would not be fitting the tale should be told, and looking from face to face and seeing none but the men of the ancient company, and questioning mutely the rest of the 5 with his eyes, if some of the five be there, and receiving their permission to cough and to tell the tale. And a great hush falls in the hall of the ancient company, and something about the shape of the roof and the rafters makes the tale resonant all down the hall, so that the youngest hears it far away from the fire and knows and dreams of the day when perhaps he will tell himself why the milkman shudders when he perceives the dawn. Not as one tells some casual fact that is told, nor is it commented on from man to man, but it is told by that great fire only, and when the occasion and the stillness of the room and the merit of the wine and the profit of all seem to warrant it in the opinion of the five deputed men. Then does one tell it, as I have said, not heralded by any master of ceremonies, but as though it arose out of the warmth of the fire, before which his knotted hands would chance to be. Not a thing learned by rote, but told differently by each teller, and differently according to his mood, and yet never has one of them dared to alter its salient points. There is none so base among the company of milkmen. The company of powders for the face know of this story and have envied it. The worthy company of chin barbers and the company of whiskerers, but none have heard it in the milkman's hall, through whose wall no rumor of the secret goes, and though they have invented tales of their own antiquity, mocks them. This mellow story was ripe with honorable years when milkmen wore beaver hats. Its origin was still mysterious when smocks were in vogue. Men asked one another when Stuarts were on the throne, and only the ancient company knew the answer: why the milkman shudders when he perceives the dawn. It is all for the envy of this tale's reputation that the company of powderers for the face have invented the tale that they too tell of an evening, why the dog barks when he hears the step of the baker. And because probably all men know that tale, the company of the powders for the face have dared to consider it famous. Yet it lacks in mystery and is not ancient. It is not fortified with classical allusion, has no secret lore, is common to all who care for an idle tale, and shares with the War of the Elves, the calf busher's tale, the story of the unicorn and the roads, which is the tale of the company of horse drivers, their obvious inferiority. But unlike all these tales, so new to time, and many another that the last 2 centuries tell, the tale that the milkmen tell ripples wisely on, so full of quotation from the profoundest writers, so full of recondite allusion, so deeply tinged with all the wisdom of man and instructed with the experience of all times, that they hear it in the milkman's hall as they interpret allusion after allusion and trace obscure quotation, lose idle curiosity, and forget to question why the milkman shudders as he perceives the dawn. You also, O my reader, give not yourself up to curiosity. Consider of how many it is the bane. Would you gratify this tear away the mystery of the milkman's hall and wrong the ancient company of milkmen? Would they, if all the world knew it and it became a common thing to tell that tale any more than they have told for the last 400 years, rather a silence would settle upon their hall and a universal regret for the ancient tale and the ancient winter evenings. And though curiosity were a proper consideration, yet even then this is not the proper place, nor this the proper occasion for the tale. For the proper place is only the milkman's hall, and the proper occasion only when the logs burn well, and when wine has been deeply drunken. Then when the candles were burning well, in long rows down to the dimness, down to the darkness and mystery that lie at the end of the hall, then were you one of the company, and I were one of the 5. Would I rise from my seat by the fireside, and tell you with all the embellishments that is gleaned from the ages, that story that is the heirloom of the milkman. And the long candles would burn lower and lower, and gutter away, till they liquefied in their sockets, and draughts would blow from the shadowy end of the hall, stronger and stronger, till the shadows came after them, and still I would hold you with that treasured story, not by any wit of mine, but all for the sake of its glamour and the times out of which it came. One by one the candles would flare and die, and when all were gone, by the light of the ominous sparks, when each milkman's face looks fearful to his fellow, you would know, as now you cannot, why the milkman shudders as he perceives the dawn. As I said, you never learn why. Okay, this is a poem by Brett Rutherford, and this is from his book, one of the newer poems collected from his book, Whippoorwill Road, rather. Thornton Burgess slipped there. Midnight on Benefit Street, 1935. 300 years ago, it was a footpath, winding among family grave plots. Moved, all moved. At least the stones were moved to pave and straighten. Now it is a strange amalgam of mansions and squalor. Every other streetlight shattered. Every other doorway an entrance into delirium and vice. John Brown's mansion lords over the street, aloof at the end of its ponderous lawn, high fence upon a looming wall, so you are always beneath it, going about your business unnoticed. Ear pressed to those stones, what might you hear beneath the slurry of earthworms? What muffled groans and chain clanks? Or maybe the slip-slide of silk upon the polished floor, the fumbling of a long-forgotten key to the snug merchant cabinets and cubbyholes stuffed with lost bags of silver coins. In the stillness of museum night, the mummy shifts in its linens, dry lips stirring in nature's dust. The stolen Buddha's hand creaks slightly as it regards its empty palm, with a wooden eye turned suddenly as bright as the orb of a tiger. Fireplaces puff out the acrid smoke of exterminated forests, ash falls in minute flakes, snow's prelude. The brooding Athenaeum thrusts up its temple front, a vault where books and the ideas within them slumber untouched for decades, tended by frowning priestesses. A hurried shadow passes the darkened armory, with its faint air of rust and dampened sulfur. Long past the freighting time, the railway tunnel beneath the street echoes. The shout of a drunkard, then silence. No, not silence. The chittering of rats. Thousands down there, in nightly migration between the two rivers. Does he linger now before that house, whose double cellar doors fronting the sidewalk, where phosphorescent fungi alarmed his boyhood visits, and feral scurryings bred nightmares of things that gnawed behind the wallpaper? He keeps the Capitol in sight, and overhead a crescent moon, and there a scintillant Venus, forming a triad with Regulus, up in the lair of the lion, the night of all nights of the year. And there the steeple, on distant Federal Hill, St. John's, the starry wisdom place. If only the worshippers knew what secrets slept above them. He passes too the house in red, the garden of roses where Poe first saw the Helen of Helens, the dark painting parlor of wooing, the door that finally barred and denied him. He looks down to the ruined waterfront, past the Episcopal churchyard, to the silted river, the rotting wharves, the sullen silent warehouses that once burst with silks and tea. In one of those dim taverns, Poe recited The Raven for whiskey. Somewhere down there, in a Chinese alley, lay the wavy El Dorado, or the Valley of Dreams. But no, these are modern times. There's nothing down there but a wallet-snatched beating for a solitary poet. Howard Phillips Lovecraft turns back homeward.
The next reader we have is Mr. Scott Thomas, who in my estimation is one of a handful of truly great living ghost story writers. And he's not actually reading from a ghost story tonight, he's reading from one of his truly memorable crafting works. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Thomas.
Thank you. I'm going to start about halfway through chapter 1 of The Sea of Ash, which is a novella. I step out of the car and take several pictures of the house. I have gone so far as to contact the present owners explaining that I am retracing the steps of Dr. Albert Pond, but they've shown no interest in allowing me inside the structure. Very disappointing. It is May now, as it was then, but today the air is warm and bright, and one is tempted to believe that the world is only what we know of it. Streets and homes, jobs, schools, television programs, celebrities, sports, fashions, products, technology, politics and cultures, familiar numbing religions, science. How easy it would be to be blanketed and blinded by these things, but I refused that luxury, just as Albert Pond refused it. The rain had continued into the night. It blew in off the shore and wrapped wet arms around the house. Albert gently urged his guest up the stairs and put her to bed. He covered her, then sat on the rocking chair nearby, watching her sleep, the dark eyes behind dark lashes, the pale rosebud lips compressed, the winsome face framed in musk-blacked hair. Perhaps her recall would be improved in the morning, he hoped. Albert left the candle burning. The hushed light replaced the room with exaggerated shadow. Arabella's face was slack and her lips parted slightly, the light glimmering softly on her teeth. The doctor remained curious as to why she had averted her head when he attempted to examine her mouth. He rose up slowly from the creaky rocker and crept closer. Ever so carefully I parted her lips with my fingers, and there found the most curious anomaly, he wrote. Her teeth, both upper and lower, were neat rows of small white petrified trilobites. Trilobites, for those unfamiliar, were prehistoric arthropods that populated the oceans of the Paleozoic period. Like crabs and insects, they sported exoskeletons, their shape roughly evoking an oval with multiple small legs ranked beneath, as with a horseshoe crab. The bodies were rather flat, segmented, with furrows that divided the black armor into 3 distinct lobes. Many fossilized examples still exist. Pond stared until the woman's eyes began to flicker. Then he backed away. He paced for what must have been hours, his mind racing, speculating, reaching for the comforting scientific explanation that would not have come. Perhaps she was of North African origin, and the fossils were some form of ritual embellishment that had been hammered into her gums. Yes, that seemed reasonable enough. After all, there were various tribes on that continent that indulged in body modification. Elongated necks, tattoos, pierced cheeks and nostrils, raised scarring and lips manipulated to hold decorative discs in place. Maybe some enterprising sideshow entrepreneur was bringing her to America to dazzle audiences. Come see the fossil-mouthed girl, but lost her to the waves and currents. It still did not seem to add up. If she were in fact from Africa, even the North or the Middle East, then how could her skin be so uncommonly pale? He had never seen Irish flesh or Scandinavian flesh so white. Exhausted from pacing, from thinking, and from the long, eventful day, Albert returned to the rocking chair and eventually dozed off. Dr. Pond dreamt of a rising gray temple, older than the Parthenon, younger than trilobites. It came up through the mist, dripping, dangling slippery black sea wrack like remnants of a net that failed to confine it. Water gurgled down the stone steps out of the great stone orifice. Moonlight shone within. He woke in the morning half-light of his chamber and immediately looked to the bed. Arabella was gone, the covers disrupted. Alarmed, the man got up from the noisy rocker and walked out into the hall. He saw that the bathroom door was ajar and his robe, which Arabella had been wearing, was flopped on the floor. "Hello," he called. He moved to the door, gave an obligatory knock, then peered in at the startling scene. The woman was reclining in a tub full of water, a sleeper dead, her legs open and crooked over opposite sides of the tub. A newborn child, pale as its mother, floated face down and motionless. Pond dashed to the tub and grabbed the baby out of the water. Both the water and small body were cold. He gasped when he flipped the baby over and saw what it had for a face. To quote his journal, "A seashell was set in place where the child's features ought to have been. It was a scallop shell, evenly ribbed, dull white in color, but for a slight mossy hue. It measured 3.5 inches by 3 3/8 inches. The shell was embedded. Flesh framed the outermost edges, fastening the mask in place. The baby was dead, obviously, and while stunned, Pond had the presence of mind to place it on the floor and turned his attention to Arabella. She was alive, her eyes had opened, and she was watching him impassively. He fired questions at her. Was she all right? Where had the baby come from? Had she left the house to retrieve it from somewhere? Was the baby hers? She actually nodded in response to the last inquiry. The man was more than perplexed. While the babe looked newly born, the mother, if she were indeed the mother, had shown no obvious signs of being pregnant. Certainly he'd seen patients whose pregnancies were nearly undetectable to the eye, but they tended to be heavier specimens than this. Besides, there was no blood in the water, no placenta, no umbilical cord. Albert helped Arabella out of the cold tub, dried her, and again put her in his robe before leading her back to the bed. She allowed him to examine her, and still there was none of the expected indications that she had given birth. "I'd like you to remain in bed if you would," he told her. "Do you understand?" No response. Arabella closed her eyes. So far she had exhibited no interest in the child. Then again, he had no idea how much time she had spent with it, not knowing when she had vacated the bed. It was possible that she had passed hours with the corpse. Satisfied that she was content to stay put, Pond hurried back to the bathroom, wrapped the baby in a blanket, and took it downstairs to his examination office, placing it on a table. He weighed, measured, and photographed the body. But for the seashell, it was a conventionally formed infant male with a trace of fine dark hair spiraling out from the crown of its head. Eager to see the features beneath the shell, he took up a scalpel and bent in close. It made no sense to me how the rim of flesh could have formed around the edges of the shell. It certainly appeared to be a natural growth of skin, but the child would have had to be alive for such a thing to occur. Flesh does not regenerate in the dead after all. Even upon close inspection, I noted no air holes in the shell, so the poor creature would have been suffocated by the mass. Again, suffocation equals death, and death precludes skin growth. Had someone stitched the border? Not likely. Well, I'd once seen a sideshow mermaid, which was created by stitching together the upper body of a mummified monkey and the tail end of a dried fish. This phenomenon struck me as genuine. Pond carefully cut the thin connecting membrane and pried the scallop shell free. He found no features underneath, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, only a circular black hole. The orifice was smooth and bloodless and deep. It was so deep that even with his face pressed to the maw, he could see no bottom, no brain, no muscle, no bones. Impossible, he said. Albert took a ruler and lowered it into the darkness. It met no resistance. He took up his flashlight and shone it down, but the darkness stretched farther than the beam. He dropped in a coin and waited for it to hit the end of the tunnel, which it did, eventually, making a soft, distant splashing sound. Normally a steady man, Dr. Pond was trembling when he hurried down to his workshop in the cellar. He tore tins off shelves, scattering nails, tools, fumbling and cursing until he at last found a reel of neglected fishing line and a sinker weight. Back in the exam room, he stood above the baby with its crater and lowered the line in. It seemed to go on forever, he wrote, and I was aware of a briny clamminess that rose up against my face. The line struck bottom at last. Pond marked a point on the line indicating where the opening began and then pulled the rest up and measured it. The hole in the baby's face had a depth of 60 feet. Pond collapsed in a chair and held his head in his hands, his heart racing at a dizzying rate and cold sweat beading his forehead. In his journal he would note, "Everything that I knew of the world died that instant. Science shattered, and my sense of reality, which now seemed to me a zeppelin plump with lies, was punctured. It sank to the ground and deflated." He sat there for some time before returning to the thing on the table. The second time, the line was fixed with a hook in the hopes that it might snag something from the bottom. Anything that could offer some explanation, if any explanation would do. Again, the string sank and sank deep into the hollow, but this time something even more startling occurred. Something yanked on the line. Pond exclaimed and stepped back, dropping the fishing line. He watched as it snaked several feet deeper into the baby's dead face, then slackened. Several moments passed before he collected himself, took it up and dragged it back up. Peering down, he saw something that had been attached to the hook. It was a piece of yellowed paper with words written on it. Wider than the opening of the face of the dead child, the paper had crumpled somewhat on its way out, which Pond later realized accounted for the smeared condition of certain freshly scrawled words. The words were still damp and were composed in blood. The paper might have been torn from a journal based on its size and texture, and one side was covered in ink writing that had blurred at some point in its history, most likely from exposure to moisture. That part was entirely unreadable. The back of the page showed the fresh letters, or what was left of them. It read, "Find fractured, smudged word, go to Sumner in smudged word, at Lexington, Simon Brink, smudged." I made the short drive from Powell Street to the humble stretch of beach where Albert Pond had discovered the naked woman. I parked the car by the road and climbed down a steep grassy embankment that hides the sand from the road. The tide is working its way in, the foamy edge stealthy and sensuous, a drowning memory of primordial lace. Wandering up and down the stretch, I try to picture the scene. This is where he found her. It chills me to imagine, right here on this very beach, this ordinary seeming beach. I take photos of the area, the cold blue sea, sunny and flashing back at me like paparazzi, and of the pallid gray sand strewn with shells and small stones. I wonder if Arabella came back here to the Atlantic after she vanished from Pond's Queen Anne. There was nothing to indicate where she went, and the doctor did in fact come to this spot when he finally realized that she was not up in his bedroom. He'd spent hours in his office with a dead child, calling down the opening in its head, dangling the fishing line, hoping to snare another clue. But it seemed that the hole or tunnel or whatever it may have been was holding on to its secrets for the time being. Pond had wrapped the dead thing in blankets and put it in his icebox to preserve it before going off to search for Arabella. First he ran down to the shore. Then he climbed into his black 1918 Nash and drove around town, cruising up and down the major roads that led in and out of Salisbury. He was more than simply concerned about her well-being, though, and that was certainly a motivation. She was crucial to the mystery that his life had suddenly been inducted into. By nightfall, he was growing desperate, and he decided finally to go to the police. The doctor revealed only a minimal amount of information, a description of the missing patient to start. He said that he had found her on the beach and speculated that she may have suffered some kind of accident resulting in an amnesia. He told them how he had taken her in, how she had slipped off with nothing but his robe while he was busy in his office. Pond was not satisfied with the degree of interest exhibited by the officers he spoke with. He wondered if he had wasted precious time by even going to the police station. He spent several more hours driving in the dark. I had never felt so alone, he wrote. Never had the universe felt so vast and I so small within it. I had, through circumstance, been made aware of something, but of what? Something either too horrible or too beautiful for humans to know.
Thank you.
Before you take off. I don't know if this is okay with you, Scott, but does anyone have any questions for Scott before we send him on his way? Scott has some books. I think you brought along a few copies too, right?
Yes.
And we have some copies of Sea of Ash that he was just reading from over in the store. If any of you are interested in purchasing one.
The sequel's coming out, we just heard.
Oh, yes, that's
It's
right.
not written yet, but it's in
Oh, it's not written yet. Minor
It's
detail.
minor details, yes.
Well,
it's gestating.
Okay.
you've got
Arabella's
notes
baby.
peppering all over the desk.
Yes. It's in the note stage.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Scott. That was
Thank
fantastic.
you.
So it's 6:45 now. We probably will adjourn until maybe 5:07, and then we'll start again with Jeffrey Thomas and Caitlin Kiernan. So thank you all very much. If you'd like, you can have a beverage or a coffee or something like that at New Harvest. They're expecting a deluge, so feel free.
And like, as Neil said, Scott will have books for sale and he's willing to sign them.
Temperature okay? The sound okay?
Yeah.
Loud? Okay.
He's so neat.
I'm so glad that was
I'm
empty.
picturing this in a little movie in my head, like,
Oh my God.